Boldwood presents The Passenger, written by J A Baker and read by Rose Robinson. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. Death twitches my ear. Live, he says. I'm coming. Virgil. For family. Always. Part 1. Prologue. The diary. He loves me. He loves me not. Jacob, the love of my life, the only person I have ever truly adored, loves me not. I am bereft, completely helpless, unable to function at the most basic of levels. All I want to do is lie in bed and think about our lives together, about the love that we shared and the unique bond we had. I want to ponder over all the good times we experienced, all the bad times even, how we melded together as one, complementing each other. Two bodies, two minds fused together for what I hoped would be forever. And now it's over. We are over. A cruel end to a beautiful beginning. I've tried to speak to him, to tell him that us being apart is a big mistake, but he refuses to listen. His mind is made up. If I could turn back the clock, do things differently, then I would. But I can't. What's done is done and cannot be undone. I made some mistakes, and now I honestly don't think I can live without him. Jacob is all I have ever thought about. From the very first minute we met, he has been on my mind. Every day, every night, his beautiful face filling my thoughts, his gentle, honeyed voice lulling me into a near hypnotic state. I remember it so clearly, the first time we first met. I was moving into my flat, my arms loaded up with boxes. I bumped into him as we passed on the path. He offered to help, his eyes, his voice making me weak with desire. I accepted, and together we bustled our way inside, laughing simultaneously as we collided, becoming jammed in the doorway before falling into the living room in a heap. The attraction was instantaneous. It was love at first sight. Such a cliché, I know, but that's how it was. The way he looked at me made my heart flip. His conventional good looks and those eyes. Oh, God, those eyes. 2 days later, we were an item. It didn't take long. Why waste time with formalities when you both know it's meant to be? We spent every spare moment together, did everything together, loved passionately. And now he's gone. I'm lying here on my bed, crying again. I can't help it. I don't know what else I'm supposed to do. I'm nothing without him. Everything I did, everything I said, revolved around Jacob, and now he's not here. I have no idea what to do, how to live my life without him in it. He filled my every waking moment, my thoughts given over to him and how our relationship would develop in the future. Except it didn't. It came to an end, and I have no idea how to react to that. I no longer know how to get through the day without him being here by my side. Everything is tinged with a dull, impenetrable greyness that refuses to lift. I'm at a low ebb. Rock bottom, actually. My life crushed. I've been sucked into a black hole, a great big void that is destroying me from the inside out. I can't continue living like this. Something has to give. This isn't me. It's not who I am. I'm stronger than this. A fighter. Tough and resilient. Or I used to be. Now look at me. This is what he's reduced me to. This is what they have reduced me to. When this sorry mess is over, I hope people will remember that I'm the victim here, that I did what I had to do to survive the bad times. My life has been ripped in two, the dry parchment of my existence crumpled to nothing in the palm of his hand. The pair of them watched my life disintegrate and turn to dust, and stood by and watched, doing nothing to help. I'm useless without him. A vacuous nobody. I have nothing to live for. Nothing to lose. So whatever happens next, should a dreadful calamity occur, know this. I was forced into it. They made me do it. None of what takes place from this point on is my fault. Chapter 1. Present day. The train slices through the sprawling swathe of fertile green. Leah gazes out at it all. Mile after mile of fields filled with crops, divided by lengths of crooked fencing and tangles of gnarled hedgerows. She keeps her eyes glued to it, her attention focused on the distant farmhouses, the impossibly straight lines of electricity pylons that stand tall and proud. Huge, silver entities that stretch over the spread of farmland and beyond. Her gaze doesn't stray, staying focused on the winding country lanes and the stream of cars that snake through them. She refuses to blink as she stares up at the azure sky, the wispy clouds and the white vapour trails that hang there like lengths of snowy candy floss. She sees it all, refusing to look away. If she does that and keeps still, it may just be enough to stop the pain at the back of her head from developing into something more, something bigger than the current, small, nagging ache. She keeps her eyes fixed on the smudge of green, staring intently at the starlings that scatter and scimitar above the rolling fields. Their bodies a cloud of darkness as they take flight and flutter up to the heavens. Anything to stop her migraine from erupting. She counts trees and fields, studies grazing cattle, thinks about her journey, the reason for it, and stops. Her flesh cold, her breathing suddenly laboured. She rummages in the bag sitting beside her, her fingers trembling as she delves into its many side pockets. Why didn't she think to bring some headache tablets with her? Too many things to think about. Too much to do. That was the problem. She closes her eyes and rests her head back on the seat, thinking about what her priorities actually were before getting here. Opening her eyes, she grits her teeth, refusing to give it headspace. Packing her meagre things and boarding this train. That was all she had to focus on, and now she has done it. She can relax. Nothing else matters. Nothing. Her fingers continue groping about, landing on a bottle of water tucked away at the bottom. She pulls it out, unscrews the cap, and glugs back the remainder of the liquid. It's warm, but it soothes her throat and eases her headache. She shoves the empty plastic bottle back inside the bag, scrapes her hair back into a ponytail, tying it up with a band and pressing it in place with the palm of her hand. Her face is devoid of any makeup, and if she were to look in the mirror right now, she feels sure the reflection staring back at her would be that of a stranger. This isn't her. not the usual Leah. But then, something happened to the usual Leah a while back. Something that damaged her irreparably. She isn't the person people think she is. The person she used to be departed a long time ago. She no longer knows herself, and, if she is being perfectly honest, now doubts she ever did. A voice echoes over the PA system, announcing the next stop. York. She feels a wave of tension begin to leave her, slipping out from under her skin, escaping out through her pores. Her fears, her many crippling anxieties, get swallowed up by the surrounding noises and gentle pull of the train. The greater the separation from her starting point, the calmer she feels. The headache that threatened to swamp her wanes as she massages the base of her skull, her fingers pressing and kneading at her flesh. The water has helped. It was a lucky find. Why wasn't she more organised? Why does she seem to spend her life in such a damn hurry? Always running, always escaping from the problems that trail in her wake. Dashing, struggling, in too much of a rush to leave her old life behind. Too eager to get away from Jacob, from Chloe, from their unreasonable behaviour. Too eager to escape from what took place. She thinks of her destination, Aunt Mary's house in London, and allows herself a small smile. It's been such a long time since Leah has seen her that even the thought of Mary's face brings a lump to her throat. The world needs more Aunt Marys. A diminutive, elf-like creature, Mary is the epitome of kindness and compassion, always with a ready smile and a shoulder to cry on, always listening, always caring. Mary is all she has left. They were always close, Mary like a second mother to her, speaking to Leah on the phone when she was a child, making sure she was happy and settled, letting her know that the guinea pigs were thriving, the only pets she ever loved and cared for. Leah stares out of the window again. Aunt Mary will understand. She will realise why Leah had to leave Durham and head for London. Leah won't have to explain that Chloe's behaviour had become intolerable, as had Jacob's. It impinged on every aspect of her life, until Leah had to pack up and go. She had to do it, and now there is no looking back. She will spend some time in London with her aunt, reflect on everything that has happened, and then think about what her next move is going to be. People fill the aisle as the train pulls into York Station. The doors hiss. The crowds murmur and shuffle along, stopping to grab at bags and to pull on backpacks. Leah watches them step off the train, wheeling small suitcases, hurrying home to their loved ones. A sliver of envy creeps under her skin, pulsing and throbbing within her. She blinks back tears, tells herself to get a grip, to stop imagining how it must feel to be loved unconditionally, to have somebody who is always on your side and always by your side, instead of having to suffer the excruciating loneliness that she has had to endure over the past few months. More passengers board, their expressions unreadable, their shoulders hunched. She watches a couple of young women as they scan the carriage for their seats, checking their tickets and murmuring under their breath. They're both similar to her in age and have a pained look in their eyes, as if they're carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. Leah shakes her head in exasperation and looks away in disgust. She wonders what reasons they have for looking so dejected and miserable. She would like to challenge them, to compare her life with theirs, get them to understand what real misery feels like. The boarding takes just minutes, The changeover's seamless as new people step aboard and locate their seats, shuffling into them, placing bags at their feet and opening laptops and tablets, eyes glued to their screens as the movement starts once again and they continue their journey south. Leah looks around at the eclectic mix of passengers. Business people, shoppers, mothers with babies strapped to their backs, even school children with their mussed-up hair and smart blazers. She bites at her lip nervously, pleased to have a seat with a table. It's a long journey when you're forced to stare at the back of a seat. A low hum fills the coach, the sound of a moving train, of people talking, tapping at laptops and tablets, whispering into phones. Sitting opposite her is a man in his 30s. He's dressed in a black pinstripe suit, his attention focused solely on his computer screen. Standing up next to him, leaning over his shoulder, is a young woman wearing a beige cotton jacket. She has bright eyes, clear skin, her countenance one of eternal cheerfulness. She notices Leah watching her and nods, her mouth fixed into a wide grin. She reminds Leah of a sloth, with her permanent smile, her dark eyes and short brown hair combed flat against her head. Leah returns the gesture, nodding in return, wondering why she is still standing, her body rocking back and forth in rhythm with the movement of the train when there is clearly a seat available. She hopes this chirpy-looking female doesn't want to engage her in conversation. She isn't in the mood for chatting, for making inane talk about the weather and how diabolical and unpredictable British summers are. She has neither the energy nor the inclination for it. "This is definitely seat 26B, isn't it?" the woman says, cautiously checking her ticket against the small sign on the wall adjacent to her head. "It is," Leah replies quietly, dipping her eyes away. She doesn't want to become embroiled in this. All she wants is to sit in silence, to enjoy some solitude away from her problems, from what she has left behind. The woman remains still, her head turned, her eyes darting about the carriage before coming back to land on Leah. "I'm really sorry to ask this, but I don't suppose we could swap seats. I'm not good with travelling backwards, it makes me nauseous." Leah doesn't answer, keeping her gaze diverted. She's tired and wants to be left alone to rake over her thoughts and plans. She definitely doesn't want this. "Only, I did request a forward-facing seat when I booked my ticket, but it looks like there weren't any left, and I really do get quite bad motion sickness if I face the wrong way." Resisting the urge to tell her to go away, to find somebody else to pester, Leah nods and stands, figuring the alternative of a puce-faced, vomiting woman sitting opposite her is far less appealing than switching seats. "Thank you. I really do appreciate this," the woman says, sliding her way into Leah's seat, settling herself in with more drama than is necessary. She gives Leah another smile and nods to the window. "Rubbish weather, isn't it? At least it's warm, though," she says, indicating outside to the veil of drizzle that has started up, covering the landscape, colouring everything in a drab shade of grey. "Yes," Leah replies, doing her utmost to not bang her head against the formica table in utter frustration at being held to conversational ransom with this person. It's all she can do to suppress a dramatic eye roll and sigh out loud. Instead, she manages a tight smile, meeting the young woman's gaze and holding it for a little longer than is necessary. As you say, at least it's warm, though. She hopes this is enough. She hopes her attempts at responding in a polite, brusque manner will convey her need to be left alone. She isn't in the mood for talking. She isn't in the mood for anything except ruminating over what she has left behind and guessing what lies ahead. She has given up her seat for this woman. What more can this stranger possibly want? "I'm Rachel, by the way," she says, her travel sickness relegated to the back of her mind. Leah nods and says nothing in return, thinking that Rachel's behaviour reminds her of a petulant child, suddenly chirpy and amiable once their demands are met. "Awful that, isn't it?" the woman continues, eyeing up the newspaper she has laid down on the table between them. She places her hands either side of the page to hold it in place, taking ownership of it, her eyes sweeping over the words, studying the screaming headline with wide, outraged eyes. Leah reluctantly glances at it. She is inadvertently drawn to the picture. The walls of the train lean in drunkenly. The floor seems to fall away beneath her. She feels her breath catch in her throat, a pocket of trapped air pushing at her from the inside, sharp and angular, as it struggles to free itself. "Yes, awful," she replies, her head full of noise, her blood like ice as she stares at the photograph beneath the headline. She swallows down vomit and feels it burn as it travels back down, settling in the pit of her belly like a raging furnace. Her eyes mist over. She blinks rapidly to clear her vision, disturbed by this unexpected image. "Seems like there's nowhere that's untouched by these awful crimes." Rachel's disembodied voice carries across the carriage, echoing in Leah's head. "I mean, this poor girl was in her bed when it happened. Imagine that. Waking up to somebody standing over you with a weapon and then being beaten half to death while you're asleep and unable to defend yourself." Leah shakes her head, stars bursting behind her eyes, her movements laboured as she tries to focus, to concentrate on what this woman, this Rachel person, is saying. "Terrible," she manages to croak, coughing to clear her throat. "The whole thing is just beyond dreadful." "Didn't happen too far from here either," Rachel says, her voice carrying a small amount of glee and morbid curiosity as she stares down at the grainy photograph of a crime scene, at the yellow tape cordoning off a property and the attention-grabbing headline. "Woman bludgeoned in bloodbath attack." Unable to hide her disgust, Leah turns and stares out of the window, everything now an indistinct smudge. Her heart stampedes around her chest arrhythmically. She swallows, suddenly wishing this journey was over, wishing Sloth Girl would go and sit somewhere else, somewhere far away from her. This is a conversation she does not want to be having. The headline is no more than sensationalistic tabloid nonsense designed to lure in voyeurs. Bloodthirsty readers who will stop at nothing to pore over every bit of grisly detail they can find about murder and rape and any other heinous crime that will brighten their day. Slumping down in her seat, Leah blinks away the film of fog that covers her eyes and stares outside, thinking how weak she is. If only she had the courage to get up and move to another seat, away from the newspaper, away from the glaring headline that is twisting her stomach into a tight ball. She closes her eyes, squeezing them shut, feigning sleep. Her mind drifts away. In the background, she can hear people chatting, discussing the recent murder, while others talk endlessly about work, using esoteric language about the minutiae of their jobs. The incessant drone of their voices swirls around the carriage, accompanied by the rustle of newspapers and the gentle hum of the train, which in itself is a strangely soothing sound that lulls her into a meditative state. For a few precious moments, she can clear her mind. Everything feels calm, the air soft with a welcome sense of equanimity. For a while, Leah forgets. She forgets about Chloe and Jacob. She forgets about the shreds of the life she is leaving behind. She forgets about the family who forgot about her. And that's when it happens. A light rocking, her body swaying in time with the movement of the carriage, a rhythmic and recurring sensation. Then an ear-splitting sound that cuts through the air like a bomb exploding. Next comes a deep thud that propels her forward, her body a tangle of uncoordinated limbs as she lands on a sharp object, her abdomen hitting the edge of the table with force. Leah whimpers, lets out a deep groan of resistance, and collapses, her body crumpled. She is unable to think properly, to breathe properly. Everything is skewed, unfathomable. More shaking and vibrating under her, around her, above her. A feeling that the walls are coming in, that the ground is disappearing under her feet. A terrible sensation that the earth is spinning wildly off its axis, taking her with it. She screams, is thrown forward again, clutches at thin air. Finds nothing. Then the grating and screeching of metal, the unbearable sound that causes her to shudder, making her skin crawl. And the shrieks, the soul-crushing cries of terror. So much screaming, animalistic, feral, terrified howling, cries of pain and dread, of confusion and fear. Another sickening groan, metal against metal. Another violent movement. This one tips her sideways, sends her spinning, the blood in her head swirling and gushing. She yells out, her voice low and desperate, as she slides backwards then upside down, her body pressed hard against a solid surface, her hands jammed up against plastic or glass. Something cold, something immovable and sharp. Too much chaos to think properly, to work out what is happening to her. She can't breathe. Her lungs refuse to work. Her throat constricts. Then the pain. So much of it. It pulses through her, wave after wave shrieking through her veins, biting at her limbs. Her eyes bulge. Her chest heaves as a tiny pocket of air finds its way in. She tries to move, but is held tight against something solid, something heavy and immobile. So hard to keep on breathing, to get enough air into her lungs. Oxygen. She needs more oxygen. Moans and cries for help surround her, unearthly protestations. People begging, sobbing, howling. What the fuck just happened? She tries to move again, to look for the man with the laptop, for Rachel, the sloth woman. Where are they? Where is she? What the fuck is going on? She tries to think straight, to fight through the thick veil of confusion. Not a dream. This is real. A crash. They've hit something at speed. Their train has crashed, come off its rails. Everything is broken and crushed, torn apart and burning. People are dying, possibly already dead. Another sudden pain bursts inside her, an agonizing ripping sensation that speeds through her diaphragm, cutting her in two. It's unbearable. Horrific. Worse than anything she has ever experienced. Her head pounds. A strangulated cry escapes from her throat. She's dying. Dear God. Oh dear sweet Jesus, she is dying. No other explanation for it. Leah gasps and splutters, thick, warm bile exploding out of her mouth, choking her. She coughs, gurgles, vomits, spits out the bitter fluid, trying to draw oxygen into her lungs, her chest wheezing with the effort of staying alive. She waits, every second a minute, every minute an hour. Time stretches out before her, endless, infinite moments punctuated with pain. On and on and on. Everything is hopeless. She is choking, gagging, praying. An eternity. Too long. Everything is taking too damn long. Where are the doctors? The nurses? The firefighters? Anybody to get her out of here. Anybody. She just needs somebody to help her, to stop the searing pain that feels like knives are being repeatedly plunged into her stomach. Sharp blades, digging, gouging, slicing at her innards. She's dying. She feels sure of it. Help. She needs help. Please, God, don't let me die. Not here. Not now. Still nothing. No sounds. No more screaming. Just emptiness. A horrible, lingering, deathly silence. It lasts for forever. All she can think of is how to breathe, how to keep her lungs working, to keep the oxygen flowing. In, out. In, out. She focuses what little energy she has on staying alive. She tries to count. Soon they will come. Somebody will help her. She gets to 10 and keeps going. She continues to 20 and struggles to concentrate, to work out what comes next. Agony. Not enough air. 30. Once she gets to 30, somebody will arrive. More time passes, an endless stretch of silence. She tries to ignore the pain, putting her efforts into staying awake, not slipping into unconsciousness, into a darkness that has no end. Then at long last, just when she has given up all hope, there are noises nearby. Sirens, voices, the crunch of heavy footsteps. Shouting, machines whirring, a high-pitched whine and the cumbersome creak and groan of metal moving, machinery tearing apart the carriage, metal fingers ripping their way through the carnage. Somebody is here. Thank God, somebody is here. They've come to save her. She tries to speak, to call out, to tell them that she's close by, that she can't breathe properly, that she needs air. But nothing comes except a stream of hot, sticky liquid that fills her mouth, coating her teeth, settling in the recesses of her gums like warm oil. A gurgling, gasping sound emanates from somewhere close by. She strains, listens, and realizes it's coming from her. Her feeble attempt at shouting for help, impaired by her injuries. Time is meaningless as she waits, the last pocket of air leaving her lungs until she feels she cannot hold out. Nothing left. No more oxygen. Just a growing darkness. A pinprick of light disappearing behind her eyes, getting smaller and smaller, her vision tunneled. Before the blackness descends, she hears something. A warped sound, distant. A voice, coming closer, getting louder until it's right next to her. A deep, resonant tone. Urgent, reassuring. "Here! Over here! We've got someone!" A figure leans close, a silhouette at first, then a face surrounded by a halo of light. Like an angel. A saviour. Her saviour. She feels her hand being held, thick, strong fingers caressing her wrist. Then a man's voice, strong, comforting. "I've got a pulse. Quick! I need some assistance. She's still alive." Chapter 2. How are your nightmares? Which ones? Leah is restless. Will's talk of her nocturnal terrors makes her skin crawl. She has so many of them, it's too difficult to set one apart from the other and place them in order of dread. She shivers, her eyes drawn to the pieces of abstract art that line the walls of his office. She wishes Will had chosen something different to decorate his workplace, something softer, less harsh, with indistinguishable soft lines and pastel colours. Something that would soothe her, rather than making her feel on edge. She stares at the largest picture and closes her eyes against the wave of revulsion that slides around inside her mind. Some would call it vibrant, exciting, innovative, artwork with a backstory. It isn't any of those things. It is a dark, hulking monstrosity of a painting. The black, ghoulish stripes that dance across the canvas, combined with the vertical slashes of orange and red, only serve to make her queasy and ill at ease. It's overpowering, sharp and striking. Not something to be enjoyed, but something rather to be intimidated by. She is sure that Will would tell her that she should be in awe of it, that she should admire its strength and fear its power. She feels none of those things. Staring at it fills her with misery, a feeling of inadequacy, of being trapped. She opens her eyes, turns away and stares down at her hands. All of them. I take it you're still having dreams about the crash? Will says lightly, as if they're talking about a grocery list or what to watch on TV, and not the stream of disjointed visions that batter at her bruised and aching brain. It's she who suffers them. How could he ever begin to understand how it feels to wake with such terror and despondency hanging over you that you can't even remember who or where you are? Leah nods, tears pricking at the back of her eyelids. She swallows, forcing them back. Most nights, I dream that I'm dying. That nobody came to rescue me and I didn't make it out alive. My lack of memory doesn't help. I still can't recall what happened prior to me getting on the train or why I was even on it to begin with. Retrograde amnesia. Will says the word so casually, so lightly, as if it's a commonplace condition and not something that leaves her feeling as fragile as a leaf floating downstream, spinning and swirling, at the mercy of the elements. It's to be expected after an accident, and yours was pretty traumatic, as accidents go. That, coupled with lack of sleep from the nightmares, will leave you feeling fairly delicate and vulnerable. He leans forward, his face coming into view out of the glare of the sunlight that is streaming in through the window behind him. Have you been taking your medication? The tablets to help you sleep? They make me feel like a zombie. Can't seem to win. They help to dull everything, but the more I sleep, the worse the nightmares become. Leah mutters. It's a vicious circle. She is lying to him. She cannot recall being given any sleeping tablets, but going along with what he says is easier than railing against him. Will is a force to be reckoned with. A rock in her unsteady world. He leans back in his chair, idly running his fingers through his hair. And your painkillers? You're still on them? She feels inclined to grab them, arrange them on the desk for him to see, to prove how hard she is trying at getting better. Reaching into her handbag, she is dismayed to find them not there. Her heart skips a beat. Her skin grows hot. I must have left them at home. I'm pretty sure I take them regularly. She isn't sure at all. She has no memory of any tablets, but feels compelled to say the right things. The things that are expected of her. Timed to perfection, the pain in her abdomen kicks in, sharp and raw as the day it happened. Will this ever end? She winces, takes a long breath, waits for the griping to dissipate, then gives him a thin, tight grimace. I wish I'd never got on that stupid bloody train. Will smiles and exhales loudly, his nostrils flaring, his face appearing larger than ever as he places his hands on the desk. Leah can't help but notice how clean his fingernails are, how manicured and pale his hands are compared to his liver-spotted face. She wants to ask him why his cheeks are so mottled and florid, why there are large marks on his skin when he isn't old enough to warrant having them. She guesses that he's in his late 40s, early 50s at a push. Yet his expression, his speckled flesh, is that of somebody much older, somebody who has lived and seen things. Perhaps he has. Apart from speaking to him here in this place where all they do is talk incessantly about her health and her endless litany of ailments, physical and mental, she doesn't know anything about him. He has a life, probably a family, a past she knows nothing about. She is an open book to him. Will is a stranger to her. You know, the mind is a funny thing, both terribly fragile and yet incredibly resilient at the same time. At some point, everything will come back to you. It just takes time. I'm still off work, Leah mumbles as she picks at a piece of loose cotton on her shirt sleeve. She feels like a small child, a miscreant caught doing something terribly naughty. Work seems like a lifetime ago. She can't even remember when she is due to return. Everything is such a muddle, her logic in tatters. Well, there is no shame in that. You've been through a massive trauma. You just need to rest up, not be so hard on yourself, and remember to keep breathing. He chuckles at his own words, as if they're sharing a private joke. Still picking at her sleeve, Leah remains still, waiting for his laughter to subside. She still has things she needs to tell him. Odd occurrences. Things she can't explain. Things that worry her beyond reason. In the lull, she interjects, her voice low and raspy. I thought I saw my brother last week. I was on my way here and felt somebody watching me. When I turned, I could have sworn I saw him standing on the other side of the road, staring at me. I let out a shriek and then he disappeared. She waits for Will to respond, to come out with an explanation as to why she saw her dead brother in the middle of the street. Because she wants to hear it. She wants to be given a reason, some sort of medical terminology thrown her way to reassure her that she is not going completely mad. My brother is dead. He died some years back. How can you explain this latest incident? His manner is suddenly serious, an authoritative air to it. Now, I know you might not want to hear this, or maybe you do, but obviously we both know it can't have been your brother. What I do know is that the brain is a complex thing and perfectly capable of misrepresenting things, allowing us to see what we want to see and hear what we want to hear. Will coughs slightly and taps his fingers on the desk, a dull thrumming that pounds in her ears and fills the room. What about the rest of your family? Scalp prickling, Leah drops her gaze to the joints in the wooden floor, focusing on the ingrained dots of dirt lodged in between each one, hoping Will moves on from this subject. Thinking about her parents makes her skin itch. Her head buzzes at the very mention of them, at that memory of that awful, awful day. She shakes her head, her lips pursed. I don't see them. Haven't done for many years now. Her eyes bulge with unshed tears. She blinks them back. Ancient history. Time to look forward, to drag herself out of the rut she has found herself in of late. And you miss them? Will has raised his volume, upped his tempo, forcing her to sit up straighter and delve into her past, even though every nerve ending in her body is shrieking at her to step away from this conversation, urging her to say nothing and leave it be. Should I? Ice fills her veins. Her words are sharp, dagger-like, as they tumble out of her mouth. You've never told me why you're estranged from them. Do you want to elaborate, or should we leave that subject well alone? Leah thinks about what a clever man Will is, how astute and shrewd he is, cornering her like this, getting her to open up about the rift, making their future conversation about her parents seem like a fait accompli, as if this moment was destined to be. He's a constant voice in her head, forcing her to confront her past, to think about those events and speak openly about them. She shakes her head, shrugs listlessly, buying herself some time as a way of putting off saying what has always needed to be said. The lump in her throat is impossibly large, obstructing her windpipe. It's a wonder she can still breathe, let alone speak. She takes a deep breath, does her best to unburden herself. They no longer want anything to do with me. They lost one child and now refuse to communicate with their only remaining offspring. What sort of people would do something like that? Leah doesn't mention Maria. There are only so many family matters she can bring herself to speak about. Will's heavy breathing niggles at her as she waits for his response. She can feel his gaze boring into her, scrutinizing her, wondering what is going on inside her head. He's the professional here. He should know exactly what she's thinking, be able to preempt her every word. And yet, here he is, making her say things that she doesn't want to say, to utter words out loud that she doesn't want anybody to hear. He'll win. He always does. She has neither the energy nor the strength to fight him. And why is that? Another shrug, then a sigh, affected and almost convulsive as an unexpected sob escapes from her throat. They blame me for my brother's death. The ticking of the clock on the wall booms in her ears. It sits there, a passive presence in the room, waiting for her to spill every secret, every sordid little detail. She waits, wondering who will speak next, her skin burning with the memory of it, her jaw rigid with resentment. Shaking her head, she blinks away unshed tears. I don't want to talk about it anymore. I'm tired. Leah glances around the room. Will's eyes are dark, the pictures on the wall monstrous, threatening. There is a bang. She jumps. Will remains seated, apparently oblivious to the noise. He is impervious to everything, every noise, every distraction. He is in a permanent state of calmness, his manner always collected and unshakable. Steady and solid in her wild and unpredictable little world. What was that? What was what? His expression remains blank, untouched by anything resembling emotion. "That loud noise! The bang! Surely you heard it?" Leah says, her voice high, marginally hysterical. She coughs, clears her throat, tries to regain her composure even though her skin is burning and her nerve endings are on fire. "Perhaps we should get back to talking about your nightmares." She can't take her eyes away from Will's face, from the liver spots that cover his skin, the large, ugly blotches that appear to shimmer in the glare of the sun that is streaming in through the window, curved stripes of burnt orange that flicker and curl their way over her, heating up her pale, cold flesh. "Another time. As I said, I'm tired. It's exhausting, going through this. Even thinking about it gives me a headache." A memory springs into her mind, causing her to gasp. The train. Something about having a headache. Something about the journey, the reason for it. Why she was on it in the first place. Why she was making that bloody awful journey. The one that has turned her life upside down. She tries to grasp it, but it's too distant, too ethereal to pin down. It flits away, like all the other memories she is unable to hold on to. It grows smaller and smaller, until it is out of reach altogether. It's only as she stands up and is getting ready to leave that it dawns on her. She can't even remember getting to Will's office. Fear settles in her gut like bitumen, coating her insides, weighing her down. The exhaustion is overwhelming. By the time she heads out to the main door of his office, she's so tired she can barely keep herself upright. She fights back tears once more. Is this what people who have suffered a trauma have to endure? Is this what she has become for the remainder of her life? She stumbles over to a bench outside and sits down, her leaden limbs glad of the rest. She closes her eyes, dips her head and shuts off to everything around her. Chapter 3. Summer 2005. A large crowd gathers at the foot of the cliffs, some of them local, most from elsewhere. They're here on holiday, magnetised by the beauty of the place. The sunshine has brought them out in droves, hordes of people walking on the pier, dotted around the promenade, spread out on the beach. So many of them milling around town and strolling over the sand like scurrying ants. The town was full, the beach crammed with people when she fell over the edge. That tiny child, her small body spinning and tumbling, her screams captured by the wind and pushed out to sea, yet nobody saw it happen. Not one single person saw her fall. They found her body afterwards, battered and broken at the foot of the cliffs, straw-coloured fluid seeping out of her ears, a thin line of blood oozing from her nose, her unseeing eyes pointed skyward towards the glare of the sun. The noise, the pushing and shoving, the commotion as people try to get near the scene of the accident, is ugly. Despite the police arriving, despite them cordoning off the area and making an access space for the emergency services, people refuse to step back. They need to get closer, to claim the scene as their own. A crowd of voyeurs gather, their voices loud and brash against the backdrop of the incoming tide that rushes over the sand. "I heard she slipped on the rocks, fell on the ledge and tumbled to the bottom like a bloody rag doll. Poor kid. God, doesn't it make you feel lucky to have your own little ones here with you?" "Bloody awful, isn't it? Gotta feel sorry for the parents. Poor sods." Chatter fills the air, eclectic emotions blanketing the crowd after the initial silence has broken. The ripple of shock, turns to euphoria, everyone relieved it isn't their family, that this tragedy has impacted on somebody else. Every one of them is exempt from the grief, from the ensuing horror. All they have to do is be passive bystanders, to watch as the drama unfolds before them. They twist their bodies to get a better view of the damaged child, to see her small head tilted in an unnatural position, to stare at her legs, splayed apart and jutting out at painful angles, to wince at the sight of her tiny mouth, twisted into a half scream, the breath taken out of her mid-cry. Greyston-on-Sea, a small seaside town known for its raspberry and lemon ice creams, its amusement arcades and long pier, isn't acquainted with death. It's a sedate place, synonymous with family holidays, golden sands, the shrieks of happy children as they paddle in the frothing waves. Not the death of a tiny girl. Not this. Never this. Questions fill the air, voices shrieking, desperate for answers, overlapping with one another. Did she stumble over the edge? Are the cliffs unsteady? There have been rockfalls in the past, boulders and huge stones that have tumbled down from the top, landing on the sandy beach, scattering far and wide as they hit the floor. Is that what happened? Did the cliff give way under her? Realization dawns. People begin to disperse, stumbling back, their eyes cast upwards. A collective fear building and growing, ballooning in their gut at the idea of a rockfall raining down on them. They stumble and shift, a body of fearful people moving in unison to a place of safety. The wail of sirens pierces the air. An ambulance expertly rolls down the ramp onto the soft sand with a thump and makes its way over to the watching throng. The bodies part to let it through, but people make sure they stay close by for fear of missing anything. Where are her parents? Where did she come from? Was she pushed? The chatter continues, wild accusations thrown around without any evidence or substance to back them up. Only the people above them, high up on the edge, can answer those questions. They have their own version of events, and even those versions are disputed, because their backs were turned when the child fell. They had been busy laying out picnic blankets, relieved to be high up, relieved to be away from the crowds below. They were like gods, up in the heavens, set apart from the people below. Their day had been peaceful, calm and happy, but not for long. An argument had broken out between the teenagers, voices raised, a loud screech, a stumble or a push, and then a protracted void where time stood still. A terrible moment that ripped their lives apart. Nothing but the whistling of the wind, the rushing of the waves below them, and a small, distant scream. Shouts and gasps had suddenly filtered up from the golden sands, up through the warm summer air, cutting through the calm ambience. Then it came. The plaintive, wretched cries of anguish from the families on the cliff. Blankets were discarded, food trampled underfoot as adults ran and screamed and howled for help, voices raw, frantic, their bodies bent double with grief and horror as they leaned over the edge, looking for the missing girl, for their child, their baby. But it was too late. It was all too late. She was gone, swallowed by gravity, her body broken, her soul departed. They shouted, howled, ran amok, asking how such a thing could ever happen. It wasn't real. It simply couldn't be. They only turned their backs for a couple of minutes, They are good people, caring, decent and attentive. Things like this only ever happen to others. Neglectful people. Parents who don't care. Not to them. It couldn't be real. It just couldn't. The eldest of the teenagers had stirred aghast. They were supposed to be looking out for the young child, keeping her safe. She was just a kid, an innocent being, and now she was dead. They needed answers. Somebody was responsible. Somebody had to shoulder the blame. "It's your fault," the young teenage girl had said, pointing to the taller boy. "You were standing next to her when it happened. You were the closest." The young lad shook his head, the colour leaching from his face. His skin took on the texture of melting candle wax as he trembled and grew pale, his features slack with shock. He stumbled, fell backwards onto the grass, his limbs awkward and stiff with fear and revulsion. The teenage girl turned to the two sets of parents, her voice cold, sharp as flint. "I saw what happened out of the corner of my eye. He thought I wasn't watching him, but I was." A collective inhalation of breath could be heard, even above the howling wind and the screech of the seagulls that circled overhead. Everyone waited, eyes wide, ears attuned as she spoke with such authority and precision it shook them to their core. "They were arguing, him and little Lucy. He said he didn't want to be lumbered with looking after her. She cried, and he told her to shut up, and she wouldn't. So he pushed her." The teenage girl remained calm, unruffled as she continued with her revelation, her features impassive. "I saw it all. It was his fault," she said flatly, not a tremor of fear in her voice, not a flicker of emotion in her face. "He's the one who did it. Poor little Lucy. He killed her." Chapter 4. Present day. Leah is back there, in that road, at that place, next to the house where it happened. Beads of perspiration bubble up on her forehead, prickling her scalp and trailing down her neck. She can sense the dog close by, can hear its low growling, feels its heat. But worse than that, much, much worse, it knows she is close by, can detect her vulnerability and smell her fear. She visualizes its twitching nose, sniffing her out. She tries to stem her growing disquiet, to quell her terror and tell herself that everything is going to be fine, that this is just a dream. But is it? It feels so real. Her senses attuned to every little movement, every beat of her heart. She has been here before, experienced this level of terror, felt the pain. She can't go through it again. With a rumbling gut, she tentatively steps onto the road, away from the gate, doing her utmost to gain some distance. Everything is still the same, and yet so very different. It's the same old hedge, the same wrought iron railings that she passed every day on her way home from school. The same ones she used to drag a stick across, back and forth, over and over and over, the noise a jarring, invasive clatter that echoed through the street. That's how it happened. The noise, it riled the dog. She knew that, was aware it would jump up and growl at her unwanted presence, at the rattling and grating of wood against metal. She knew no better, finding the noise pleasurable and the dog's reaction entertaining. That was all it was. No ulterior motive, no desire to be confrontational or oppositional. She was a child, for God's sake. just a kid. That's not how her parents saw it. She was blamed, told to stop misbehaving and to stop being so keen to court controversy and danger at every available opportunity. Not in those words, obviously. She was only 10 years old at the time, but with the benefit of hindsight and experience, she can see that that was what was meant. "Why do you insist on annoying that poor dog?" her mother had asked as they drove her to hospital, her father pushing through traffic and honking his horn as he manoeuvred around corners at top speed. "The owner said he's asked you before to stop poking it with sticks. Honestly, Leah, why do you do these things? For a clever girl, sometimes you do the silliest of things."
"Here's hoping this has taught you a lesson, eh?"
her father had said as he swung the car into a space and yanked on the handbrake with such force she felt sure it would rip up out of the floor of the car. She had wanted to tell them that it wasn't her fault, that the gate had been left slightly ajar, and that the dog had managed to escape. The owner should have kept it locked up and away from other people. But she couldn't say any of those things. The pain rendered her speechless. A screeching line of agony that raced up and down the soft underside of her arm. She hung on to it, pressing in place the towel her mother had given her to stem the flow of blood. "Make sure you keep that in place," she had been told as they slid in the back seat and fastened their seatbelts, her mother eyeing the growing crimson bloom that was appearing through the thick, toweling fabric. "We don't want to stain the upholstery. Your dad's just cleaned the car." And that's how it was. That's what her parents' reaction was to her trauma. Perfunctory and judgmental. Unlike the time Ellis fell in a patch of boggy land when they were out walking. They had both been warned away by their father. He had seen the signs and told them both from under his brow that under no circumstances should they wander over that way. She had listened to every word, terrified by the prospect of sinking deep into the earth, swallowing clods of grass and mud, choking and gagging as the air was sucked out of her lungs and replaced by viscous, foul-tasting mud. But Ellis didn't hear. He was locked in his own little world, immune to his father's warning, and so stepped straight into that patch of marshland. His body slid under as swiftly as water down a drain. Leah had cried out, alerted her parents, screaming that he was gone, that Ellis was drowning. Her dad had thrown himself in.